What if the people closest to you are quietly studying your weaknesses, not your strengths? Most people believe a fake friend is someone who clearly betrays you, someone who steals, lies, or stabs you in the back in front of everyone. But the disturbing truth is far quieter than that. The most dangerous people in your life rarely announce themselves. They smile. They show up to your birthday. They comment kind words under your photos. And yet, deep inside, something in them is calculating your decline, not celebrating your rise. Few people realize that fake friendship isn't a single dramatic act of betrayal. It's a long, slow psychological pattern built from envy, insecurity, and unresolved wounds the other person doesn't even admit to themselves. Marcus Aurelius once reminded himself never to be overcome by anger at men, but to understand their nature, the hidden springs behind their actions. This isn't cynicism, it's clarity. Because once you understand the hidden architecture of fake friendship, you stop being confused by betrayal. You start anticipating it before it ever touches you. In this video, we're going to uncover 5 disturbing Stoic truths about fake friends. Truths most people never notice until it's far too late. By the end, you won't just understand other people better. You'll understand yourself and why you keep attracting the wrong ones. Stay until the end. The 5th truth is the one almost nobody sees coming. Notice this pattern carefully. Some people are warmest to you exactly when your life is falling apart. They check in. They send long, caring messages. They tell you it's going to be okay. And on the surface, this looks like loyalty. Most people misread it as love. But here is the hidden psychological truth. For certain people, your suffering doesn't threaten them. Your success does. When you're struggling, you are no threat to their identity. You confirm something comfortable in them. The unspoken belief that life is hard for everyone, that nobody is doing better than them, that the world is fair in its disappointments. Your pain becomes, without them even realizing it, a quiet form of validation. This is what Nietzsche pointed to when he described resentment, a hidden resentment that disguises itself as virtue. The person who comforts you in your lowest moment isn't always lying. The care can be real, but underneath it often lives a second, unspoken feeling. Relief that you are not, right now, ahead of them. Watch what happens the moment your life improves. You get the new job, the relationship that finally works, the body you've been training for, the business that starts gaining traction. Suddenly, the same person who texted you every day during your struggle goes quiet. The enthusiasm dims. The compliments come a beat too late, a tone too flat. This is the deeper emotional motivation beneath it. Their support was never really about you. It was about their own need to feel needed, to feel superior in subtle ways, to feel that the natural order of comparison was undisturbed. You see this everywhere once you know what to look for. The friend who was endlessly supportive when you were single, but distant once you found a healthy relationship. The sibling who showered you with advice when you were broke, but stopped calling once you started earning more than them. The colleague who mentored you generously when you were junior, but turned cold the moment you got promoted above them. Carl Jung would call this the shadow at work, the part of a person they refuse to look at directly, the jealousy they would never consciously admit to feeling, expressed instead through subtle withdrawal rather than honest confrontation. Here is the memorable insight to carry with you. Pay less attention to who shows up when you're down, and far more attention to who stays warm when you rise. Comfort during your suffering is cheap. Genuine joy at your success is rare. That is the real test of loyalty. This one is subtle, and it disturbs people once they truly see it. Some friendships don't feel like connection. They feel like being studied. You'll notice that certain people start adopting your interests, your opinions, even your tone of speaking, shortly after meeting you. At first, it feels flattering. You think, they really understand me. But understanding and imitation are not the same thing. Most people misread mirroring as compatibility. In reality, mirroring is often a strategy, sometimes conscious, usually not, used by people who lack a stable sense of self. Instead of building their own identity from the inside, they borrow yours. They watch what makes you interesting, confident, or admired, and they absorb it as their own. This connects directly to Jung's idea of the persona, the social mask people wear instead of revealing who they actually are underneath. A person without a strong inner identity will often attach themselves to someone who does have one, not out of love, but out of psychological hunger. You become their borrowed identity, and borrowed identities always resent their source, even while depending on it. The deeper emotional motivation here is almost always insecurity dressed up as closeness. They are not trying to know you. They are trying to become a version of you that feels safer than being fully themselves. Look at how this plays out. A friend who starts dating someone shockingly similar to your type right after you describe your relationship. A coworker who suddenly develops the exact same ambitions you've been quietly working toward, timed suspiciously close to when you finally opened up about them. A family member who criticizes your goals in private, yet describes nearly identical goals as their own in public. Schopenhauer wrote about this kind of dynamic when he described how mediocrity cannot tolerate genuine individuality nearby. It either tries to drag it down or tries to wear it like a costume. This is the memorable insight. Real friends are inspired by you and still remain themselves. Fake friends are influenced by you and slowly disappear into a copy of you. If someone's personality keeps reshaping itself around yours, you are not looking at a friendship. You are looking at a reflection that resents the mirror. This truth is the most uncomfortable one because it reveals something about human nature most people prefer to ignore. A fake friend does not necessarily want you to fail completely. That would be too obvious, too easy to notice. What they actually want, on a level they rarely admit even to themselves, is for you to stay just slightly behind them, close enough to relate to, never far enough ahead to threaten the comparison. Most people misunderstand this as simple jealousy. It's deeper than that. It's about status regulation, an unconscious psychological mechanism humans have used for tens of thousands of years to track where they stand in a social hierarchy. Some people built their entire identity on being the smart one, the successful one, or the one who has it together within a friend group. Your growth, however unintentionally, threatens that role. This is where Stoic philosophy becomes sharp. Epictetus taught that other people's reactions to your progress are not within your control and were never meant to be your responsibility. The discomfort someone feels watching you improve is theirs to manage, not yours to apologize for. But notice the emotional motivation underneath this behavior. It is almost never really about you. It is fear. Fear of being outgrown. Fear of being left behind. Fear that if you keep improving, you'll eventually realize you don't need them anymore. This shows up constantly. The friend who subtly discourages you from starting the business, framing it as looking out for you. The partner who mocks your new healthy habits as extra or try hard, right as you start transforming your body and your discipline. The parent who downplays your achievement at dinner, not out of cruelty, but because your growth quietly highlights paths they never took themselves. Nietzsche called this kind of person the leveler, someone who, instead of rising to meet a higher standard, tries to pull the standard down to where they already are. It feels safer to shrink someone else than to grow yourself. Here is the insight worth remembering. Anyone who needs you to stay small in order to feel comfortable around you was never rooting for your full potential. They were rooting for your familiar limitations because those limitations made them feel safe. This is the truth almost everyone has felt, but rarely names directly. Some friendships are not built on who you are. They're built on what you currently provide: attention, status, access, entertainment, emotional labor, or simply convenience. Most people assume that if someone calls them often, invites them places, and seems engaged, the friendship is solid. But frequency of contact is not proof of depth. It can just as easily be proof of utility. The hidden psychological truth is this: instrumental relationships feel identical to real ones, right up until the function disappears. The friend who was always around during your party years, but vanished the moment you became focused and boring. The connection who needed your help moving, networking, or venting endlessly, but who is suspiciously unavailable when you need the same in return. The acquaintance who reappears exactly when you become successful again, after a long, convenient silence. Marcus Aurelius wrote that he should do good for others, without needing them to know it or repay it. True virtue gives without keeping score. Fake friendship, by contrast, is almost always quietly keeping score, even if neither person says it aloud. The deeper emotional motivation behind this pattern is rarely conscious cruelty. It is usually self-preservation. People gravitate toward whoever currently makes their life easier, more exciting, or more validated, and drift from whoever no longer serves that function. It is not always malicious. It is simply unconscious, and that is what makes it so easy to miss. You'll see this most clearly in moments of transition. The work friendships that quietly end the day you change companies. The childhood friendships that survive only through nostalgia, with nothing left to actually share in the present. The romantic relationships where affection rises and falls suspiciously in sync with how impressive your life currently looks from the outside. Jung would call this a relationship rooted entirely in projection rather than connection. The other person was never relating to you, but to what you represented for them at that time. The memorable insight here is simple, but cutting. Watch what happens to the relationship when you have nothing left to offer. That is the moment real friendship and useful friendship finally reveal which one you were actually in. This is the truth almost nobody talks about, because it doesn't look like betrayal. It looks like nothing at all. Fake friends rarely attack you directly when you grow. That would expose them. Instead, they withdraw. The replies get slower. The invitations stop. The enthusiasm fades into vague, polite distance. No conflict ever happens. No conversation ever clears the air. The relationship simply, quietly, dies. Most people misread this as natural drifting. We just grew apart, they tell themselves. Sometimes that's true. But often, what actually happened is far more specific. You grew, and they couldn't grow with you. So distance became their unconscious form of self-protection. The hidden psychological truth is that silence is rarely neutral. Silence after someone's success is frequently the sound of unprocessed envy, choosing avoidance over honesty. It is easier to slowly disappear from someone's life than to sit with the uncomfortable feeling of being left behind by them. This connects to something Jung warned about repeatedly. What we don't consciously confront in ourselves, we act out unconsciously toward others. A person who refuses to face their own stagnation will often, without ever naming it, begin to punish the person who reminds them of it, simply by retreating. The deeper emotional motivation is shame, not malice. Shame at not keeping pace. Shame at watching someone they once considered equal now move into a life they secretly wanted for themselves. Rather than feel that shame directly, they remove its source, you, from daily view. You'll recognize this in your own life if you look closely. The friend group that slowly stopped including you after you stopped drinking and started building something real. The relative who used to call constantly, who now only resurfaces for holidays, since your growing stability no longer gives them anything to fix or feel needed by. The old friend, who used to be your biggest cheerleader, who now likes your posts but never actually reaches out. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself that some people fall away not because of cruelty, but because their nature simply could not keep pace with his own direction in life, and that this, too, was something to accept without bitterness. Here is the final, most important insight of this list. The silence of people who can't handle your growth is not a punishment from the universe. It is information. It is them quietly answering a question you never even had to ask out loud. Why does this happen so consistently? Across cultures, across centuries, across every kind of relationship. The answer is uncomfortable, but simple. Most fake friendship isn't driven by evil. It's driven by insecurity wearing a friendly mask. Human beings are wired for constant social comparison. For most of our evolutionary history, your position in the group determined your access to safety, resources, and belonging. That ancient wiring never fully disappeared. It just changed its battlefield, from tribal survival to careers, relationships, appearances, and online validation. When someone close to you grows, their nervous system doesn't always register it as good news. Sometimes it registers it as a quiet demotion. Not because they're a bad person, but because their ego, the fragile, defensive structure protecting their sense of identity, interprets your rise as evidence of their own stagnation. This is the ego Jung spent his life studying. Not arrogance, but fragility disguised as confidence. People with unresolved insecurity rarely attack the people who succeed around them. Instead, they quietly diminish them, distance from them, or unconsciously hope to see them struggle, because someone else's struggle restores a comfortable, familiar emotional balance. Add to this the deep human fear of being left behind. In friendship groups, in family roles, in romantic dynamics, in professional identities. And you get exactly the patterns we just walked through. Sudden warmth during your struggles. Mirroring instead of genuine connection. A need to keep you smaller. Presence tied to usefulness. Silence in response to your success. None of this means people are inherently malicious. It means most people have never done the inner work to separate their own self-worth from their comparison to others. And until they do, your growth will always cost them something internally, even when they smile while watching it happen. This is precisely why Stoicism insists on radical self-responsibility. Not because other people's reactions don't matter, but because you cannot control them, and trying to manage everyone else's insecurity around your progress is a battle you were never meant to fight. Knowing these truths is only half the work. Here is how a person with real emotional intelligence and stoic discipline actually responds. Stay calm when you notice the pattern. Reacting with anger gives away your power and confirms the comparison they were already feeling. Don't over-explain your success, your choices, or your growth to people who clearly feel threatened by it. Explanation is for people who are curious, not for people who are uncomfortable. Set quiet boundaries instead of loud confrontations. You don't need a dramatic conversation to slowly create distance from someone whose presence costs more than it gives. Protect your energy by noticing who celebrates you versus who merely tolerates you. Redirect your time toward the former without guilt. Stay focused on your own mission, regardless of who keeps pace and who falls away. Marcus Aurelius didn't write his private reflections to convince Rome of his worth. He wrote them to remind himself, daily, that his direction belonged to him alone. This entire pattern existed long before social media, but social media made it almost unbearable. We now live inside a permanent comparison machine. Every update, every milestone, every good morning from a beautiful kitchen or a new job announcement gets broadcast instantly to everyone who knew you when you had less. There is no privacy in growth anymore. There is only an audience. This means the ancient psychological patterns we just described: envy disguised as support, mirroring instead of connection, status anxiety, conditional presence, punishing silence, now operate at a speed and scale that previous generations never had to navigate. A friend doesn't need years to feel quietly threatened by your progress. They can feel it in 3 seconds, scrolling past your story at 1 a.m. The attention economy has trained people to perform closeness rather than build it. Likes, comments, and "so proud of you" messages can exist with almost zero emotional investment behind them. This is exactly why emotional intelligence has become one of the most underrated survival skills of modern life. The people who can read past the performance, who can sense the difference between genuine warmth and comparison wearing a smile, are the ones who build relationships that actually hold weight. Understanding these Stoic truths isn't about becoming paranoid or distrustful of everyone around you. It's about finally being able to tell the difference between connection and competition disguised as connection, a skill that is becoming rarer and more necessary every single year. Here is what all 5 of these truths point toward, underneath everything else. You are not responsible for managing other people's insecurity about your life. You are not required to shrink so that someone else feels comfortable standing next to you. And you are never obligated to explain your growth to people who only ever showed up for your struggle. The friends who quietly disappear when you rise were never really walking beside you in the first place. They were walking slightly behind you, comparing footsteps the entire time. This is not a reason for bitterness. It is a reason for clarity. The Stoics never taught indifference to people. They taught indifference to what you cannot control, so that your peace would never again depend on someone else's reaction to your becoming. So move forward anyway. Build the life, the discipline, the success, the version of yourself that some people simply will not be able to stand near. Let your growth filter your relationships naturally, the way fire reveals what was never built to withstand heat. As Nietzsche might have put it, the higher you climb, the thinner the air becomes, and not everyone was meant to breathe it with you. Walk forward regardless.